and we welcome your questions. I realize I failed to introduce myself, and I'm reading as Stars in Global Health, so perhaps I'll do that. So my name is Dominique LaForest. I am the program officer on the Stars in Global Health portfolio, and I'm joined by my colleague Gloria Boley, who is the program analyst on the portfolio as well. Okay, I see a question that has come in the chat from Luke. We are a registered Canadian charity. We are also registered charity in South Africa under the name Water Roller Africa. Which entity should we use to apply? Either one. If you are a registered charity in South Africa, like fully incorporated as an independent entity in South Africa, I would suggest you might want to apply under that organization simply to make the budgeting easier. As you may have seen, there are caps on certain budget categories, such as this subcontractor category. So if you applied with your Canadian entity, the Canadian entity would be the primary grantee, and I imagine your South African entity would become a sub-grantee. They would then have a cap to 50% of the overall budget flowing directly to them. So by applying with the South African entity as your primary, you might just give yourself a little bit more flexibility in terms of the flow of funds. Yeah, go ahead.
That's great. Thanks for that. Now, the challenge that we have is that the South African entity has absolutely no action behind it. We just got it. And it has,
Gotcha.
you know, all of our experience and our studies and surveys have been done under our Canadian thing. So how do I say, hey, while so-and-so is applying, it's actually the bigger guy that's applying who's got all the credentials and validity?
Okay, we've dealt with that before. Would the Canadian, even if you were to apply with the South African entity as the primary guarantee, I'm assuming the structure of the larger, more experienced Canadian entity would provide support in a variety of functions, such
Absolutely.
as administrative support and oversight to the South African grantee?
Absolutely.
So my suggestion would be to indicate, if you do decide to move forward with the South African grantee as the primary, to make clear in the collaboration section of the application form that the Canadian entity has much more experience, and just kind of provide a brief overview of the type of support and oversight that the Canadian entity would provide to your South African counterpart entity. And then that will make it clear when we get to the eligibility and negotiation stages, if you are to get through to that stage, that would make it clear for our team. And then we would follow up. Certainly, if we get to negotiation, we would follow up to get clarity on all of that. The good thing is that both entities are eligible, so you can really make the ultimate decision. And then I would just suggest that you're making really clear what's being evaluated at the innovation screen and at the peer review stage will really be the team makeup. And your team makeup is not necessarily bound to the grantee entity. It's the broader project team who can sit at your grantee entity, at your sub-grantee entity, can be a partner, you know, a staff member at a partner. So you're not limited to just the team members at the grantee entity. So talk about that wider team that's going to be providing the fulsome support to the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions on that, Luke, or that's clear?
No, what you're saying is all clear. It's trying to get it down within the word count limits, trying to explain something which you kind of wish that they already knew that before.
I understand. And that could, I believe you're also able to, are you able to upload a supporting document on the application? If you're struggling with the word count, Luke, to explain that relationship, follow up with us via email and we'll explore what additional information we can support on our back end. Because like I said, this is that relationship and the experience of the South African grantee is not going to be evaluated in the review and selection process. That really comes to bear at the negotiation stage. So it shouldn't impact your how the project itself is being assessed and evaluated.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
No problem. Coco, I speak French. Translation is not possible. Unfortunately not. On ne peut pas offrir une traduction pour cet appel, mais vous pouvez demander vos questions en français et on peut vous répondre avec une réponse en français aussi. OK. Coco, on vient de discuter une question assez
assez compliqué.
Oui, assez compliqué avec qui a Gloria, like it really has the specific entity related implications.
D'accord. C'est une question qui traite qui traite de l'institution, d'une institution particulière qui est basée au Canada et en Afrique du Sud. Et donc, c'était pour savoir laquelle des entités pouvaient appliquer. Donc, c'est vraiment spécifique et relié à cette candidature en particulier.
Thanks. All right, folks, we're happy to take any of your questions. I know some of you may be here just to sort of listen in and see what you can learn from others. But please feel free to put your questions either in the chat or come off mute and ask them. Raise your hand. We'll call on you and you can come off mute. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Jennifer. I work for an organization called For Africa. So we're an NGO that does work obviously in Africa. We have a Canadian arm that is dedicated for fundraising. So I'm the development director here. So it's sort of like Luke's question. I'm trying to understand the cap. So the project we're going to be identifying is in Uganda. We have a team and we're registered in Uganda, but they don't facilitate as much of the fundraising. So usually we'll put in the grant application, but we're all part of the same umbrella, even though we exist as separate entities legally. Is that the same situation where it should be coming from Uganda, not Canada, because only 50%, obviously we don't need 50% of the revenue in Canada because
Yeah, so that's where this sort of complicating factor comes into play about the caps. And just as sort of some background, the reason we do this, we absolutely understand that many entities have sort of seats in Canada specifically for the function of fundraising. But what we're trying really hard to do is to direct funds like to the places where they're being used so that those teams can actually build out their capacity and become really the managers of those monies more and more. That being said, the cap, what we're talking about when we talk about a sub-grantee cap is the amount of money actually being managed by the sub-grantee. The Canadian entity with the other 50% of the funds could support, the purchase of equipment that's being used in Uganda. We would still expect that the majority of the overall budget be put towards expenses incurred for the implementation of the project efforts in the implementation country. So in this case, Uganda, for instance. And so the Canadian entity could, for instance, pay the salaries of consultants, if that's applicable, could pay the salaries of international staff that are going to be either contributing to the implementation of the work, the research work, training, for instance, the purchase of equipment that's going to be used in the Ugandan context to implement the project, things like that. So if those are if those expenses are going to be substantial, you could work the budget in a way that you're still managing the 50% from the Canadian entity, but then using it towards implementation in the Ugandan context. If you're, again, though, the Ugandan entity is fully incorporated as a legal independent entity in Uganda, they could also be the primary applicant. And then they could receive the vast majority of funds. Your Canadian entity could, if that remains relevant, provide support or what have you. but in this case, it may not remain relevant. I keep emphasizing the type of incorporation in country, because that's often where at negotiation we hit some hiccups. There is a difference between, in many jurisdictions, there is a difference between like an international NGO registration versus actual legal incorporation in country. So for us to be able to sign with an entity and they be eligible, that entity in, say, Uganda needs to be an independent entity. It can't be a subsidiary of an American institution, for instance, because that means it's not eligible, because the entity we would have to sign a contract with is the American primary, right? So there's a distinction. This is when it becomes complicated for our Canadian friends or others with international organizations. So make sure you have real clarity on the eligibility of your Ugandan partner entity. And if there's questions about that, it might be safer to apply through the Canadian entity.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
No problem at all. Oui, Coco.
Bonjour, moi je parle français, je suis Coco, je suis en République démocratique du Congo. Je travaille dans la région de Kwilu, où on est directement avec les communautés qui sont vraiment impactées sur les questions du changement climatique, avec la malnutrition qui est causée par l'avancée un peu de la sécheresse et le manque d'eau. Alors, la préoccupation pour moi était, la première préoccupation, mon enregistrement n'est pas encore activé, donc je me suis enregistré, on m'a demandé d'attendre, donc je suis en train d'attendre. Et puis, de deux, par rapport à la région du projet, est-ce que c'est toute la RDC, c'est la région du Kwilu est aussi concernée, au risque que nous commencions déjà à travailler sur le proposal et que notre région n'est pas concernée dans les projets. Parce qu'en fait, nous sommes beaucoup plus dans le cadre sécurité alimentaire et puis santé, dans la mesure où nous proposons un peu, avec les changements climatiques, il y a par exemple la perte de tout ce qui est viande. Hein, vous avez les populations manquent beaucoup de tout ce qui est énergie ou tout ce qui est poisson. Alors, nous cherchons, nous travaillons pour essayer de compenser cela avec d'autres techniques. Par exemple, il y a les laits, on ne sait pas accéder au lait, on ne sait pas accéder à la viande. Et nous allons, par exemple, avec les produits comme le lait de soja, pour proposer de compenser un peu à ce qui manque par rapport à cette question du changement climatique. Alors, on voulait vraiment avoir beaucoup plus d'éclaircissement pour comprendre un peu bien d'abord la région du projet et les innovations dont il est question. Ça va pas dans le cadre de l'agriculture. Donc, ce n'est pas vraiment on cherche à aller dans le cadre de l'agriculture, mais puiser ce que nous pouvons avoir dans ce que les communautés produisent et développer un additif alimentaire pour faire face à toutes les maladies de kwashiorkor qui amènent pratiquement à la mort. Voilà un peu ma préoccupation, c'était de comprendre un peu très bien la question que le proposeur nous pose. Voilà. Je ne sais pas si Gloria peut peut-être bien m'éclairer parce que je parle anglais et français. Voilà.
J'ai pu bien comprendre, mais ma réponse, je vais passer à Gloria pour mieux communiquer. Mais so Gloria, in terms of like geography of implementation,
yeah,
it's up to them. All of RDC is eligible.
Yeah.
Like they can go down to a region, they can go down to a specific community. It's really up to them to define their target population based on, you know, the scale that they find reasonable and feasible to assess proof of concept with the grant timeline and funding amount.
OK. Donc déjà pour répondre à vos questions par rapport à la région du projet, donc toute la RDC est éligible. Donc c'est vraiment à vous de choisir la région dans laquelle vous souhaitez travailler. Ça peut être plusieurs régions, mais ça dépend vraiment de vous, de vos objectifs, de l'objectif du projet et aussi du temps que vous avez. Donc c'est 18 mois pour compléter le projet. Donc c'est à vous de choisir, mais toute la RDC est éligible.
And then in terms of the question, he's talking like agriculture versus food security versus malnutrition and like the type of project. So I would highlight the need to be able to demonstrate positive health outcomes. So the connection to the food security and nutrition piece is important. In terms of innovations, this is really where it comes down to like, is this bold? Is this unique in the context? That's really what we're, what he's basically going to need to make the case for in the application for our reviewers.
OK. Et donc, par rapport à votre question sur l'agriculture et puis la nutrition et la sécurité, donc vraiment, ce qu'on cherche, c'est que vous arrivez à démontrer si les résultats positifs sur la santé de l'innovation et aussi dans votre application, dans votre candidature, il faut que vous vous expliquiez clairement comment cette innovation, est-ce que la solution que vous proposez, est-ce qu'elle est unique, est-ce qu'elle est innovante dans le contexte dans lequel vous opérez et vraiment faire ressortir ça pour que lorsque votre application sera évaluée, et puis ça puisse être bien évalué.
Coco, est-ce qu'on a bien répondu à vos questions?
Et vous aviez aussi une question par rapport à l'enregistrement, je pense. Yeah, he mentioned the registering of the NGO. Yeah. I'm not sure about this one, Dom.
Whoops, sorry. Si vous avez... Oui, allez.
Oui, pour l'enregistrement, parce que j'ai enregistré, on a dit que toutes les propositions, il faut être enregistré avant. Mais jusque-là, ça fait 3 jours, je ne vois pas la réponse.
On vient d'avoir 300 enregistrements dans la dernière semaine. Alors, on a deux employés qui travaillent sur le processus, sur procéder les enregistrements. Alors, une patience, on va apprécier, mais vous serez enregistrés par la fin de semaine, certainement. OK. Great tag teaming, Gloria. Okay. Luke, health is broad-based. Our project addresses an underlying problem that leads to unhealthy. Is the grant condition specific, i.e. does it need to address a specific health issue? Okay, great question. No, it doesn't absolutely need to address a specific health condition. You'll see in the application form that in the proposal details, that initial section, you're being asked to address or to select the primary sort of health risk and then the primary climate risk pathway. We're really trying to encourage folks to hone down on what is your proof of concept seeking to establish, right? And eventually you're going to need to select a set of indicators for some health issues so that you can actually make the case that you've created impact towards improving that health condition, right? And so I would say think through what you want what outcomes you're going to be trying to prove in terms of the proof of concept, and then sort of work backwards in terms of identifying the primary. It doesn't need to be all encapsulating, but we need you to select one health condition, and we understand that there might be others. And so then when you come to the questions that ask you about like to describe the health condition that you're seeking to address, that's when you can say this is the primary, but given the nature of, we're also, addressing these others that often are, together because of a similar, climate risk pathway, for instance, and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I've gone through that list of climate sensitivity health risks, and I've kind of looking at it, I have to park myself with mental and psychological health, which is not, it is, but it isn't, so I've been struggling with this because basically our whole project addresses the whole area of particularly women carrying buckets of water on their heads.
Okay.
There's a very, very simple innovation that takes that weight off of the head, which has all kinds of health implications, of course. and puts it on the ground so that these women can move 5 times more water with greater ease and efficiency and stuff like that. And of course, we've been doing this now for a number of years, have proven the concept. I mean, it's very, very obvious when you see it. You think, well, it's common sense. But if I have to address it from a standpoint that this new innovation obviously will provide the proper climate for more water, which leads to better health and hygiene, and growing gardens, which leads to nutritional food. So you understand that.
I see.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I mean, I wish, you could say, well, if these women started rolling their water instead of curing it, then in time their spines wouldn't be bent over the way they are. But that's not really the issue. The issue is that because they have limited access to water, the implications are that the whole sanitation and health environment which they're living in is also compromised and threatened. So if we could provide a solution for that.
Right. So the proof of concept is sort of going to be testing the acceptability of the innovation within the target community, but then also to assess whether that actually led to greater volumes of water accessible to families and communities for the purposes of. But then you're going to need, so what I would suggest is think about that end of the sort of outcome spectrum. Like, are you going to be monitoring, increased hand washing, or hygiene metrics, or are you going to be doing decrease? I mean, this is much harder, but decreased waterborne disease incidences, or I would think through those outcomes that you actually anticipate being able to measure, and then that's the health issue that I would target.
Okay,
that's my suggestion.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. Olexi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please correct us if we're wrong here. But the question is, if our company is registered in India, but our main projects now we're implementing in Africa, can we apply for funding? We don't have legally incorporated organization in Africa yet. So yes, under this funding call, all entities incorporated in Canada, or we're a Canadian-based funder, so that's why Canada. So in Canada or in low and middle income countries, of which India is one. So that is absolutely fine. And then implementation in Africa, as you may have noted in the RFP, we're selecting at least 60% of projects implementing in the sub-Saharan African context. So that would qualify you for that 60%. So yes, absolutely, an entity incorporated in India but implementing a project in Africa is eligible. I would suggest that you will want to make a strong case for existing partnerships in whichever African context you're going to be implementing, so that the reviewers have a good understanding of why your team is, the right implementer in whatever community context you're talking about. They'll want to see those established partnerships. So that would be just my strong suggestion to highlight in your application. I see another question in the chat from Yusuf. I have project-specific question on eligibility. I sent an email yesterday, so I wanted to know how long does it take to get feedback. We're getting a lot of questions lately, so it's taking us just a couple days, Yusuf, to get back to our emails. Sometimes we try to get back as quickly as possible. Do you want to ask that now, or shall we wait until we can provide you the answer via email? I'll take it. We'll follow up. Oh, go ahead. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Yusuf.
Yeah, maybe I can try to ask just part of it.
Sure.
So basically, it's about using some components which is not eligible for the grant, but then that component just being used as an enabling component to the primary output of the project. So I would like to understand, does that invalidate the project to be eligible for the project?
when you, Yusuf, when you say there are ineligible components, can you clarify what you mean by that?
All right. Okay. For example, you say that the project cannot fund anything to do with electricity or something, maybe solar kits and so on. Yeah, but then we're just using that particular component to enable like our target people to have access to the particular service that we'll be providing for them in order to improve their condition.
Yeah, at that point, like the electrification of health clinics and things like that is not going to be eligible under this funding call. I recognize that your goals are still health focused, but at this point, we're not going to be funding like the electrification of health infrastructure or the like.
All right. Okay.
Okay. And we'll still follow up via email, Yusuf, so you have that documentation of response as well. So don't worry about that.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank
you. Okay, we see another question in the chat from Anna. Oh, and I see that Gloria has shared the portal. Okay. And Anna, if you have any trouble with registrations, just feel free to follow up with us via email. As I was mentioning to another participant here, we're a little bit delayed with processing registrations now. We had 300 this week and 300 the week before, so our team is trying to catch up as quickly as possible with those registrations. But do note that you can take a look at the application form on our website before you have access to the online application form, so you can begin to prepare for that. Lauren, so US entities implementing in African countries don't qualify. Correct, US entities are not eligible to apply for this funding. All right, we've gotten through the questions in the chat. Happy for anyone to add more questions or use the raise hand function or just come off of mute. We have about 15 minutes left together. Sabine, please go ahead.
Sabine, vous pouvez poser votre question. Vous pouvez juste enlever la fonction muet.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour.
Moi, je viens de Burkina Faso. Je suis en train de... En fait, je veux bien postuler pour l'appel à projet. Je veux savoir, j'ai consulté la liste et puis mon pays est éligible en fait. Maintenant, mon institution n'a pas encore bénéficié de financement de Canada, de GCC, Grand Challenge Canada. Maintenant, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas de souci à ce que je postule? Parce que c'est ma première fois. Je suis du Burkina, mon pays est éligible.
Oui, absolument. Vous pouvez postuler absolument, même si vous n'avez jamais reçu de financement de Grand Défi Canada.
Mais excusez, une dernière question, s'il vous plaît. Est-ce que pour une institution, il n'y a pas de conditions d'ancienneté pour pouvoir postuler? Il n'y a pas de conditions d'ancienneté?
Des conditions d'ancienneté dans le sens où l'institution doit avoir de l'institution. Okay, Dom, I'm gonna
like how old the organization is, Gloria? Is that what
how long the organization has existed?
No, as long as it's an established incorporated entity.
Okay, donc non, il y a pas vraiment, il y a pas de règles par rapport à cela. L'essentiel, c'est que votre institution existe et qu'elle soit enregistrée dans le pays, donc au Burkina.
Ok, parce que mon institution, elle est nouvelle. Ok, merci beaucoup, je vais postuler.
Oui.
Merci beaucoup.
Pas de quoi.
Super, merci Sabine. Okay, I see a follow-up from Anna here. No, so like any institution incorporated in the US or in Europe or in any high-income country other than Canada is not eligible to apply as the primary grantee. You could work with a partner institution in a low middle income country that is eligible, and your institution could operate as a subgrantee or a subcontractor, but American and European entities cannot be the primary applicant grantee. Philomena, I would like to ask, is there a template for the written proposal? Yes, so the full list of application questions is available on our website. Gloria, I would love if you could just put the link to that webpage in the chat. Thank you. And so you can see once you register, it'll take a couple days, 2 or 3 business days to process your registration. And then once your registration is processed, you'll be able to access our grant management portal called Flux. And then on that grant management portal, you'll be able to launch and start a new application. There is a complete template with very specific questions that must all be answered. Those questions match up specifically to our eligibility criteria. Those that are reviewed at the innovation screen are indicated by an asterisk next to the question on the template. So only a subset of questions is reviewed at the innovation screen, because at that point we're really reviewing for whether the idea is relevant to the call and whether it is in fact innovative. And then at the peer review stage, if the application makes it through to the next stage, the full application will be reviewed by a panel of expert peer reviewers. And so, yes, that full template, all the questions are available as a PDF on our website, so you can review those before you get access, possibly. The application must be submitted through the online portal, though. We cannot accept emailed Word doc, PDF versions of the application. It has to be through the portal. Make sure you give yourself enough time. We know that some folks are in contexts where losing power is not, unfamiliar. Make sure you give yourself enough time to submit those applications by the deadline. We can't, provide sort of one-off approvals for delayed submission. So make sure you give yourself enough time for that. Philomena, if you have any follow-up questions about that application template, just let us know. During application, do we attach supporting documents? I'm seeing that, Philomena, as a follow-up question. So there's no required follow-up documents. The only requirement is that you complete all of the questions within that template. That's the only requirement. Luke, I see your question, but I'm going to go over to Jonathan and then I'll come back to you. So Jonathan, please go ahead. You should be able to come off mute, Jonathan. Oh. We can't hear you. I see you're trying to speak, Jonathan, but we can't hear you. Unfortunately, we still can't hear you. You might have to put your question in the chat, Jonathan. Okay. Philomena, yes, we'll be making a copy of this recording available. We'll upload it to our YouTube site along with the other recordings, so you'll be able to find it in the same place. Okay, while we wait for Jonathan to put through his question through the chat, I'll move back to Luke's question. Our project has a larger budget than the RFP limit. Can we propose a larger context and apply for funding as part of the cost? So yes, but I would caution that you'll just need to make sure that you're able to very specifically track and allocate GCC funds to the scope of work that is defined under the eventual GCC grant. So like the money will need to be traced specifically to, you know, particular remuneration, particular activities, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then additionally, the proof of concept. So when we define that scope of work at the negotiation stage, the proof of concept will need to be specific to what GCC has funded as well. So if this is a component that you're testing of the larger project, that can make sense. So not prohibitive. I would just make sure that in the application, you're being very clear about what the reviewers are assessing, and the reviewers should be assessing what you're proposing GCC to fund.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much.
No problem. Coco. Gloria, a question here.
Oui, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Je vais mettre le lien pour vous dans le chat, Coco.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left before the close of this call. Of course, if you have questions that we've not fully addressed or follow-up questions based on what we've discussed today, please feel free to reach out to us via email. We'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible. But while we have these few minutes left together, please feel free to jump in and ask any final questions. Jonathan, were you successful? I see that it just said connecting to audio, so I'm wondering if we might be able to hear you now. Nope. Oh, sorry, I know you're trying. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. I think we've had a productive few discussions, and we appreciate you coming and taking the time to ask these questions ahead of your applications. We're really looking forward to reviewing everyone's applications. This has been an exciting new sort of area for GCC to explore. So we're really keen to take a look at what's coming through. Yeah, Luke, go ahead.
I would just say that I attend a lot of webinars like this, trying to figure out the whole granting world, because believe me, it's
complicated.
It's complicated stuff like that. But I must say that I'm really impressed with a smaller group like this, and I know that people are struggling with the technology. That happens to everybody, Jonathan. Don't take it personally. But yeah, it is excellent that a grant maker would actually provide an opportunity like this to actually ask some question, because I know that you think that you're doing a really good job on conveying the message, and no faults there. But on this side, you look at some of the questions or so, and it's just like, oh my God, like, how am I ever going to answer this to satisfy the ones who are going to be reading it? So yeah, it's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Great. That's wonderful to hear that these are useful sessions. Thanks so much for saying that, Luke. Gloria and I have also both been on the other side of the grant seeking, like have been grant seekers. So I think we very much try to put ourselves in your shoes and back in that space when we put all of this together. Okay, I've seen, Jonathan, your message come through from Kodia, Uganda, your first time applying. That's wonderful. The registration deadline is next Thursday, so December 15th. And then the submission deadline is the following Thursday, December 22nd. And Gloria has provided links to our website in the chat. grandchallenges.ca, and all of the deadlines and the key documents are available there, and you can always follow up with us via email for more information. So we are at time. I'm going to end our recording